Welcome to the official YouTube channel for me, the Colin Cowherd Podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button right there so you don't miss any of our football content this postseason. Going to have instant reactions after every big game. Thanks. Our wild card reaction is presented by Uber Eats. Get game day deals all season long. We have on Uber Eats. Use it every week. Not as many games and lopsided games, but John Middlekauff and I are here to discuss Philadelphia's win over Green Bay, Denver getting hammered by Buffalo despite scoring first. We'll get to Mike Vrabel to the Patriots and Mike Tomlin's disaster against the Ravens. Let's start with Philadelphia's sort of dominating win from the opening kickoff that was fumbled. Packer fans grumbling about that. John, as I looked at the weekend, Buffalo, much better than Denver. Baltimore, much better than Pittsburgh. Philly, much better than Green Bay. If you go to last year's wild card weekend as well, there were some really lopsided scores. And this is something I've hit on a lot. As the league, and I've been on this for about 3 years, as the league has tilted the rules toward the offense, quarterback now is the only way seemingly to win, the better quarterback. And today, Jalen Hurts wasn't great, but Jordan Love, like he was in college, was reckless. I do feel like this year, more than any I can remember, it had an NBA feel. 4, 5, 6 teams at the top special, a pretty small middle, and a bunch of garbage in the back end. Were you surprised by Philadelphia really controlling this game over Green Bay?
Well, Jalen was not very good. And now, granted, he hadn't played in a while because of the concussion. And he looked, I would say, before they kind of hit their stride, their offense had struggled passing-wise, and he wasn't good. The problem is Jordan Love was atrocious. Jordan Love saw Justin Herbert's effort and tried to duplicate it because, he throwing those interceptions all over the place. And I know he's banged up, but that offense was – I thought if they would have played – not the game they played last year against the Cowboys, but just had a solid offensive performance, they would have been right in it. And he shot him right out of the game really, really quick because think how often during the McCarthy era and then even during the LaFleur era with Rodgers early on, the defense often let the Packers down. They were a joke on defense. They played pretty good
I thought
today.
They kept him in
and
the
their
game.
Offense. Their offense was really, really bad. I'm not shocked. Bo Nix on the road, rookie quarterback in Buffalo. Russell Wilson in that performance. I think we both saw that coming. I would say the Herbert performance was, it's one of the worst games you'll ever see him play. For sure.
I talked about this yesterday in the pod. They don't have a number one receiver. Their number two, Palmer, was hurt. Their best receiver, Keenan Allen's a bear. What happens in these playoff games? Young road quarterback falls behind. Starts making throws he may hold back on in the regular season because he knows it's the last game of the year. I thought Jordan Love made some throws today that felt like, hey, I got to get some juice here. I got to make something happen. I don't know if he makes those throws 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. So I kind of defend quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, who, by the way, Jordan Love's always been a bit reckless. He's always been more Favre than he has Aaron Rodgers. And I'll give the Packers credit. Xavier McKinney, they went out and spent some money on Josh Jacobs. Green Bay historically in the free agent market doesn't take a lot of swings. I thought they did. I think they need a pass rusher. I think and I could, we'll see what they do at corner. I don't feel bad about this for Green Bay. I think they're young. I don't think they have Philadelphia's roster. They were on the road. They didn't play well down the stretch. I thought Philly would win. It was a weird game. Green Bay was out of rhythm, out of sorts offensively, but I don't feel like if you're a Packer fan, you look at this. Hell, at one point, they were down 6 and were being totally dominated.
Totally. Well, listen, even if some miracle they would have been able to kind of get back in this game, they had lost half their team. They would have had no chance to play anybody after this game with all their injuries. And one thing that really stands out when you just look at this weekend, but specifically that, when it comes to the Eagles, they spent a lot of money on Vic Fangio, and that defense as the season has gone on has looked fantastic. The 2 young defensive backs, they signed Zach Bond. He played a different position. They moved him to stand-up middle linebacker, and he became a first-team All-Pro. That happens when you hire one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. And, look at Miami. They were complaining that Vic Fangio was an asshole and demanded too much of them. You think Philly, I mean, come on. I mean, Mike McDaniel, I don't know if you saw the story last week. He said, I can't find these guys enough. They just don't show up on time. Meanwhile, Philly yearned for that
Yes.
accountability, and look what it shows. Now, their defense, listen, the playoffs, sometimes your quarterback is just going to play like crap or have rough stretches. Your defense can carry you. Defense, the history of this league, even as rules have changed, the best defenses win in January. It's no different in college football. You got to have big time defensive plays in these big games because you're playing all pro, Hall of Fame level guys on
Yeah, I
offense.
mean, I think also Philadelphia, take out the concussion for Jalen Hurts. From week 4 on, Philadelphia was humming. They weren't very good in the first quarter, but they finally got good in the first quarter late in the season. They took a 10-0 lead in this one. But all year long with Philly, from about week 4 on, we were like, God, they're awful in the first quarter, but they're really good. We said this 2 years ago about Philadelphia. We said it the first 10 weeks of last year, or first 7 weeks of last year. If you go to Philadelphia over the last 3 years, there have been stretches where they looked like the 49ers 4 years ago. They just have more good players.
Well, think about this. If you just said who are the best players on Philadelphia's offense, you would list you would probably include some offensive linemen before you even got to Dallas Goedert. You'd be like a guy 7 or 8. He made a play tonight that
Oh,
looked like a high school kid that's going to Alabama or Ohio State would make, in a high school game. And again, that's by far Saquon, Jalen, the two wide receivers. He is their fifth weapon, and he's a Pro Bowl level talent. I mean, that play, it does sometimes in the playoffs. Obviously, X's and O's play a big role, and the best coaches are usually playing in these games. But sometimes you get a one-on-one against another guy, and you shot with Jacobs. Like the cream of the crop rises in January, and that play by Dallas Goedert. I mean, wow. I mean, if that's your fifth option on offense, good luck trying to stop
yeah,
him.
and I think you see it in college and you see it in the pros. In college, what schools have better recruiters, Ryan Day, and more transfer portal money? Ohio State. If you go look at who's left, Marcus Freeman, Ryan Day, and Chip Kelly, pretty good staffs. And then you go in the NFL, and who has the best general managers? Well, Kansas City, Brett Veach, Howie Roseman. A lot of the Detroit, by the way, has been on like a 4-year run. A lot of the
DaCosta in
Yep.
Baltimore.
You start looking around this league, and I mean, Philadelphia, in the end, I think we've felt this for 3 years. When he had Shane Steichen, they were good enough to win the Super Bowl. He had a couple of bad picks at coordinators. They righted the ship this year. For all my misgivings about Nick Sirianni, this freaking roster is good. I mean, God, Slay today had a great pick. And I mean, he's a guy now that's fallen sort of, out of the front page of the sports section in Philly because they've got these two, Mitchell and the other corner. So I mean, Philadelphia, when Slay can be like the third most talked about corner you have, I just think Philadelphia. I look at Green Bay and I think to myself, you know what? If you're gonna lose, you're gonna lose 22-10 to Philadelphia on a game that Jordan Love didn't play well. It's not a terrible day for the Packers. They're not equipped to beat this team in Philly.
No, I agree. I think if you're a Packer fan, especially I think you've kind of come to grips with it down the stretch. But I think big picture, they got to figure Love out a little
Yes.
bit. I mean, I was high on him after last year. This year was a little bit of a
Yeah.
roller coaster ride. Obviously, the injuries played a part, but this reckless nature. I mean, Brett Favre is one of the greatest players in the history of the league for like a 10-year stretch. He won 3 straight MVPs. You don't just get to play like Brett Favre. You got to corral yourself a little bit, and that's why they went out and got Josh Jacobs, right? Just to just kind of I would say take a little pressure off Jordan Love. But man, I mean, at one point in time on a second interception, he had thrown 2 last year against the Niners, and then 2 this game in the first half. That was 4 interceptions through his last 6 quarters in the playoffs. You can't win like that. I'd rather have a guy playing like crap like Jalen Hurts who's not turning the ball over. At least I just punt and play
By the
defense.
way, there's a play that happened in this game with about a minute left where Saquon Barkley got a handoff. Could have broken for a 60, 70-yard touchdown, and instead he slid to end the game, essentially. And it really states, I'll tell you something. Saquon Barkley has been such a class guy in this league. In New York, he comes out smelling like a rose when he gets traded. He didn't complain about, not breaking the all-time single-season record. That slide at the end of the game against Green Bay. I got to tell you something. There are not many running backs that I can remember. I loved Walter Payton. Just as a guy, as a human, I love McCaffrey. I've met Christian a couple times. By the way, can we just admit this? This is a Saquon Barkley led team. I mean, they Jalen Hurts went 2 quarters without a completion. This is Saquon Barkley's team. And by the way, I love it. He is really, if somebody gave him MVP, it'll go to a quarterback. There's everything about him. His toughness, his elusiveness, his intelligence, his class. I just think he is such, and the truth is Jalen Hurts, I think he's got enough self-confidence. I don't think it bothers him at all. I don't think it bothers Lamar Jackson that Derrick Henry gets all the flowers. I think it's just a really cool thing when star quarterbacks are fans of the star running back.
Well, I think one thing with the Eagles specifically is Jalen. I think Lamar's more of a little. He's got more rah-rah to him in terms of outspoken leadership inside those walls. That's not Jalen's thing. And last year, think of who retired on their team. Jason Kelce, one of the greatest players in the history of the franchise, and Fletcher Cox. I mean, those are 2 guys that are going to be in the Ring of Honor that were the leaders on the team. So you replace him like Saquon Barkley. One thing I don't think Howie gets enough credit, and I think he's learned this, is like, he was pigeonholed early as being like an analytical GM, like a Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey doesn't give a shit about character, cohesion. He just puts the best players together. Howie has learned to value that greatly, and Saquon Barkley, obviously, he has to have the ability when you're going to pay a guy money, but from the off-the-field character stuff, seamless fit, and he fills a void that they lacked once Kelce retires. So, this team has hit some, and Brandon Graham, who's nominated for the Man of the Year, I forget his injury he tears his shoulder, is out. So he's just gone, and having Saquon around there is a really, really big deal. I mean, think about the last game of the year. He has a chance to break the record. We can say it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to me. I think they had already won. But that would have been something I think Saquon would be like, hey, man, this has been my whole career has been a little underachieving, given that I played with the mess I want. Didn't say a peep. Didn't say a word.
Not a word.
It's like, yeah, I'll do whatever I need to do. And he remember earlier in the season when they wanted him to, he like, hey, you want to break the record against the Giants? He's like, no, let the other guys run it. And that's in this sport with so much going on. I don't think he gets enough credit for the guy. We know how great of a player he is. And I thought Brady, one thing to be a great running back, you don't need elite top end speed. It's not and him and Derrick Henry, he compared him to Ohtani. It's like if you can pitch and hit, because I can live with 20-yard runs all day long, but at any moment, him and Henry can go 70, 80 yards.
Yeah, I think there is something about Philadelphia. They do things that dysfunctional organizations do, and it works for them. I think, and it may be just the city of Philadelphia. It's such a glue city. Washington has the political power. LA's got the famous people. New York's got the money. Boston's got a lot of history. Dallas has a lot of flair. Philadelphia has kind of a small town feel for a big city. Like everybody in that city, anybody in my life, I've been doing this for a long time. It is amazing how often I'm in an airport, on a ski slope, at a restaurant, anywhere that I live, and they're Eagle fans and Phillies fans. There's just something about the loyalty. They've been, they've had so much success recently. The Eagles have been so good now for a stretch, and the Phillies are very good. The Sixers are still disappointing, but their sports teams are pretty damn good. They went long stretches of just being like Chicago is now, where they just got beat up. There's something about Philadelphia, the city, it's almost like the fans keep you in line. Embiid, fans aren't going to mess with that bullshit. Like if you don't play, fans can turn on you very quickly. And I don't know. I just look at Philadelphia stars. I can go back to Mike Schmidt, Ron Jaworski. There's a toughness and a unique kind of, I don't know how to describe it. When I watch this Philadelphia team, it feels like a Philadelphia team. Young stars in their prime, older stars, and they all just gel. They all kind of get along. And I didn't think Jalen played well today. I'm not sure he's 100% healthy. But I thought that game, honestly, if you could bet a football game, after one series, I was like, yep, Philadelphia. Green Bay was out of their element. They look rattled. I'm like, oh, this is over. This game, I felt 5 minutes in. I felt that with Baltimore and Pittsburgh. It's like, okay, this is done. I can tell you right now, Pittsburgh's not ready to play. It's time to look at this weekend's tastiest matchup in this week's Sunday Night Food Ball, brought to you by Uber Eats. Okay, let's pivot to Buffalo 31, Denver 7. I don't think this surprised anybody. A lot of the sharps looked at some Sean Payton stats historically, but I think we've both said this. Denver lost by 24. I'd still rather be the Broncos than the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've got a great offensive coach and a quarterback who's going to be a hell of a player. We'll get to Pittsburgh later. But I kind of looked at this Denver loss and I thought, listen, man, this was not a winnable game. This Buffalo team, Kincaid's now been added. I think James Cook is terrific. Josh Allen right now is playing as well as he's ever played in his life. He's getting very, very good protection. I don't see a lot of flaws with Buffalo. Do you?
No, I mean, I think when the schedule came out, when we found out who was playing who, we were destined to get Buffalo hosting Baltimore, and it played out there pretty seamlessly. I think Buffalo, I think they have more pressure on them in this upcoming game than Baltimore, given how well their offense. James Cook has changed their offense. I mean, early on in Josh's career, they did not have a runner
and he just
like
smells the end zone. He feels it.
How about Khalil Shakir? I mean, that stat they said today that no one has more yards after contact beside Jamar Chase than him. I mean, he has been fantastic. Keon Coleman, the Florida State rookie, has really come on as the season. And there is a calmness to Josh's game. I think both Josh and Lamar, I think, for guys that are runners and make these just spectacular all-time great plays, are so under control. It's always what Patrick has had, and he had it earlier in those two guys. It always felt like Mahomes from day one was just completely under control, even when chaotic situations. You watch those two guys, it's like even when chaos happens, it's like I don't feel like they're freaking out as they're scrambling around to make a play. I mean, they are in the peak of their powers right now. And how does a rookie quarterback, and I'm sure you saw the stat about Sean Payton's record against bald coaches. It wasn't Sean Payton. I just think a rookie quarterback on the road, they were going to need a historic defensive performance. And playing at Buffalo, I mean, that place, it kind of hit me today. And there's been a lot of great games at Lambeau as well. The one thing cool about the NFL is some of these smaller cities, for as big as this, how fun does a home game at Buffalo feel in the playoffs? The buzz in that place. I mean, I would imagine we're recording this even before the Sunday night game. That's probably going to be a night game next week. And that place is going to be ripping and rocking, and it's cold and the snow and the fans.
One of those of the many reasons football is king, and there's about 8. In the NBA, there are clearly glamour cities where the stars want to play. In Major League Baseball, there's about 6 teams that can win a World Series based on payroll. Think about the dominant teams in the NFL right now: Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore, Green Bay. Okay, those are 4 of the winningest teams. The New York teams are in the toilet. Washington was for 10 to 15 years. And the one big market team is Philadelphia. And they're exceedingly well run. And I think that's just part of the appeal. I got to tell you, I am such a big fan of Kansas City and Baltimore. I can't lose this year. I would love to see Lamar make a Super Bowl. I would love to see Josh Allen make it. I mean, the AFC division winners and the AFC Final Four is the same as last season, and I don't think it's going to change. I think Kansas City, Baltimore, and Buffalo are going, and I should say, I think Houston's going to mostly win their division. C.J. Stroud was down this year. The O-line wasn't as good. I think the AFC, I don't think there's going to be a lot of change. It's going to look like college football. You're going to see about 4 names, 5 names every year.
I know, listen, I mean, Veach and Andy, their resume speaks for itself. Same with Baltimore. I do think Buffalo's shorter. I do think we have to throw them in the mix of just how well run they are. Obviously, quarterback-led operation, but they transitioned. Everyone thought they were cutting a bunch of guys. A lot of people picked the Jets to win the division. They had a hat and T-shirt game like basically in Thanksgiving. And they have become the Patriots now of that division 5 straight times. They are, I mean, a huge part of this upcoming game is they are the 2 seed. I mean, these home games in the playoffs, we just saw the Chargers go on the road and get smacked. It really, really matters. And obviously, Baltimore had kind of a weird regular season with some losses. Buffalo handled business, and they are hosting this game for a reason. And I think, I don't know if much separates them and Baltimore. At least they have been doing it not as long. But in terms of like, they're the two elite second tier teams in the AFC. They just haven't been able to beat Mahomes, but they're kicking everyone else's ass.
28 unanswered points at one point. I mean, it was Allen to Kincaid, Allen to Curtis Samuel, Allen to a running back in the end zone. I mean, Josh has just become an unbelievable player. I feel like Buffalo's a little Phil Mickelson in Tigers prime, where sometimes it's just timing. And I look at it and I think to myself, God. Now, I do think Buffalo is going to beat Baltimore. I do. I think at home they're going to beat them. I don't know if Kansas City will take care of business. I mean, Kansas City's going to beat Houston. I may be a sucker. I think this is the year for Buffalo to get to the Super Bowl. I think this is the best version. There's just if they can stay healthy, there's nothing I don't like about them. There's nothing I can't find a flaw with the team. The game, their defense is not great. That game against the Rams when Stafford went up and down the field, they're not a great defensive team. But Kansas City is not a great offensive team. And now do you like Buffalo against Baltimore?
I would say no team down the stretch beside the Chiefs, who flipped a switch, is playing better than Baltimore. I mean, their offense. Last year, they were the number one overall seed and had the best defense since like the Pete Carroll peak days. This offense is dramatically better than last year because Lamar's better. They added Derrick Henry, who somehow does not age. I mean, he's in the peak of his powers.
What's funny is he wasn't great his first 2 years in the league, and now he got better as an old running back, which is the opposite of what happens for star running backs.
It's crazy. Mark Andrews is now back, looks fantastic. Bateman, who they've kind of ridden out over the course of his career, has turned into a really good player. If Zay Flowers comes back, I do think guy for guy, if we just say the quarterbacks cancel each other out, I think Baltimore is better than Buffalo, but home field, there's going to be a lot of listen, this is one of the best games of the year. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. And I would slight lean Baltimore, but I'm rooting for one of these two teams. And listen, Andy, Veach, I know all these guys. I do think it would be cool. I mean, part of Phil is Phil never took down Tiger in a big moment. Is Kansas City just going to kick the crap out of Houston and then beat this team and then just be back in the Super Bowl and then everyone's going to pick them and they're just going to win another Super Bowl? The football shouldn't be that easy. It wasn't even for New England, right? It never happens. Three-peat. Usually, most of the time, you get bounced. I actually think Houston, the one thing you saw, D'Amico, if you did a coach draft from scratch, he'd go in the top 10. He is an elite defensive mind. He's an elite leader. CJ Stroud finally got his 2023
it's funny.
back.
CJ at home, I think he's now like 13-5 or 12-5 and 100 passer rate. He actually is a much different quarterback at home. I don't think there's any question.
For sure. Nico Collins is one of the most talented young players in the league. They have they have one pass rusher. They just gave a 2-year contract for $50 million, and they guaranteed every penny in Donnell Hunter, who was kind of working Joe Alt yesterday at moments. Tough first matchup. Will Anderson is one of the best players to ever play for Saban, got drafted 3rd overall. I mean, they got some high-end guys and a real coach. Now, we just saw the map. One advantage for Andy is they literally just played him. So they had already game planned for him 3 weeks ago. They only have to watch these last couple games. I've been around Andy Reid. He's been in the office these last 2 days. They're already on it. I mean, it's a tough spot for Houston. But you watch them, you go, God, they got, if CJ is going to play like that, they have more talent or every bit the talent as the Chargers, and their high-end players are so high. You think they could give a game. Remember last year against Baltimore for a half, they gave them a game, then they ran out of juice. I would imagine. I haven't seen the line. Probably a 7-point spread for the Chiefs.
I think it's a steps league. I think I went into this season saying about Green Bay, they're too young. They're a year away. That bears itself out watching today. And I think Houston, the same thing. I still think Houston needs another draft. I think they're an inconsistent football team because they're not a team that if they suffer injuries in certain spots, their O-line wasn't as good this year.
Oh,
So they're
not
not a
good.
Super Bowl. I think Green Bay and Houston are good enough to win a playoff game. They're not good enough to win two. Certainly not good enough to get to a Super Bowl. But there's let
CJ is a better play. I would take CJ over
I
Love
would too at this point.
after what I saw
Absolutely.
Love this year.
That was this week's Sunday Night Food Ball, brought to you by Uber Eats as the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Uber Eats, use them every week, has the best game day deals all season long. Order now for game day. I do, we do. Great company. And now for our next segment, Whiskey Business, brought to you by Green River Whiskey, the official whiskey of the Colin Cowherd podcast. It's good stuff. When you want to enjoy life's simple pleasures, reach for Green River Whiskey. Whether it's rye whiskey, single barrel bourbon, you're getting over a century of craftsmanship packed into every bottle. So hop on over to greenriverwhiskey.com and discover a legend in a bottle today. Let's go into the Mike Tomlin Pittsburgh stuff. So I thought it was interesting. This may have been the moment. Dan Orlovsky at ESPN, as the Steelers just look unprepared and no juice. I mean, the one thing about Tomlin, he was always known as an elite motivator, the best underdog coach in the NFL statistically for a decade. They had no juice, none. It was almost as if they weren't concentrating. Dan Orlovsky had a breakdown of some tape in the first half from the offensive line. It was brutal. It was embarrassing. You like guards pulling into each other. And the O-line this has been my criticism for a lot of defensive coaches, Mike Tomlin, Pete Carroll. McVay and Andy Reid can fix an offensive line in an off season. Andy's done it multiple times. These defensive coaches really struggle with it. And I watch this offensive line. They've drafted it. They've got some good talent. They couldn't create a run game, but it was Baltimore going into a game without Zay Flowers and having a 15 straight runs and still doing it. And I think Pittsburgh's got very conservative owners. They're not big spenders. That's always been their reputation. As you were an Eagle Scout, Steelers always had a reputation. They didn't take as many big swings. It was draft and develop. I think they need innovation. I would say Ben Johnson feels like a good fit here. Do you think they have the cojones to let go of Mike Tomlin?
Well, I don't. And you and I have been talking this about for a year. We said it last year, and it doesn't even feel like they entertained it. So I guess another year they should entertain it. I don't expect them to. But eventually you're going to get to the line of diminishing returns where his value is going to start to go down. Right. And right now, think of the desperate team from the Jets to the Jags to the Bears, his value is pretty high. Like you could trade him for valuable draft picks. You're a couple years away from that not being the case. Like you can't just keep going about this because think about this. Mike Tomlin, like you said, he's a defensive guy and known as just one of the best leaders in the NFL. So even if we remove, if you're Tomlin's defense attorney, like they can't fix the quarterback. Okay. I will remove the offense. Let's just talk defense and effort. Well, you're coming out against your bitter rivalry, and Herb Street now are questioning, have they quit on Mike Tomlin in the first half? Have they quit? So his whole thing was like effort and leading the boys and the troops into battle. Well, that clearly went away. And their defense has been atrocious down the stretch. I mean, guys wide open. It felt like Lamar Jackson. It was like a preseason practice. I mean, it's like, what are we doing? You could have called the game at halftime. You really could. And they went with Russell Wilson. Anytime that you are celebrating that our quarterback room only cost us a couple $1 million, it's probably, and you got rid of the guy that you just drafted 20th overall. I mean, we probably saw this coming. I mean, as it got cold, Colin, Russell really came back to earth. Now, he hit a couple big plays in the second half, but the game was already
That's more Pickens than Russ.
Why wouldn't you, if you're Ben Johnson? And clearly he's still apprehensive about, he's very worried about taking a job that's going to ruin his career. Don't blame him because he sees all these other guys take jobs and just derails their career. He's got a great thing going. I think he makes like $5-6 million in Detroit with an offense full of Pro Bowlers. Well, you can trade Mike Tomlin. If you're Pittsburgh, you can take a young coordinator, a young guy like they did with Mike Tomlin, and put him in a position to succeed. And then it just gives you some life. The other problem is maybe bottoming out wouldn't be the worst thing ever. The 49ers this year sucked. They kind of need some high draft picks. Why? Because their roster is really expensive. It's actually a healthy thing the way it played out for them. if they get it right. Winning 9, 10 games every year and just getting curb stomped in the first round they're making no progress. It's impossible to get a quarterback. It's hard. You got to hope, cross your fingers, hope you can get a TJ Watt at pick 22. That happens once every 5 years. So your draft is difficult, and you're just seeing a team that they take a lot of flyers for character, and eventually, like Antonio Brown, yeah, okay, you get a Hall of Famer, and then you get George Pickens, who it's like,
all right.
wouldn't
Well,
want that guy on my team.
I couldn't tell you the last time Chase Claypool. I couldn't tell you the last time they had a receiver room without an attitude. Deontay Johnson. It's what they do. And it's funny because Tomlin doesn't get those guys on defense, but it's almost as if, hey, I'll let the offensive guys worry about the drama. Defensively, he doesn't get a lot of attitude, but the offense,
high-level guys on D.
So it's the lack of urgency at quarterback, the lack of development, offensive line. All that stuff is obvious. But when you see the lack of effort, it's like, Mike, that's kind of your hallmark. That would be like Kyle Shanahan can't run the ball. It's like, well, dude, that's kind of who you are. If the run game stops in San Francisco, then you got real questions. Yeah. I think it's time to make a move. Yeah.
Listen, I would trade him. I 100%. And if I was Mike, I understand. I've said this over and over. Being the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're going to be a coach, is awesome. Like, I don't blame him for not wanting to leave that post. But we saw specifically with Andy Reid. He got a fresh lease on life, and it changed the course of his career because it invigorates you. It lights a fire under you. It kind of puts the chip back on your shoulder. I don't know if you saw Jimmy Johnson throw out a trade for Mike McCarthy, a Pittsburgh guy. To me, if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I just let Jerry re-sign Mike. The Ben Johnson thing, take a swing. And listen, it might not work out, but the loyalty, commendable. But you get to a point where it's like the loyalty thing feels like it's run out. This is not where you're now kind of an embarrassment because Tomlin's whole thing is the standard is the standard. So the standard is this is back-to-back years, double-digit blowouts by the second tier of the AFC that are in a different universe.
If Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders lands in Cleveland, Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Shedeur Sanders, you will have the fourth best quarterback in the division. That's a death sentence for a coach. And Stefanski with a good college quarterback, a lot of energy, youthful, healthy. Keep your eye on, we just saw what Bo Nix did with an offensive coach. We saw what Sam Darnold did with Kevin O'Connell. I think if you just look down the road, this is not getting better. There is no great quarterback on the horizon for Pittsburgh.
Well, if Joe Burrow's healthy, how often are they going to go 9-8? So if you played this season over again, the Steelers are not the Bengals are in their spot. We saw the last game of the season when they played it. It was 19-7 going into the fourth quarter. Now the thing with Cleveland, let's just assume Cam Ward goes one. I cannot imagine primetime allows his son to go to Cleveland. I can't. He's already kind of hinted that he would go. Archie Manning for Eli. I think he would draw a line in the sand. Though, with Deshaun's career looking over, Shedeur would start immediately on a team that has a bunch of talent. But I have a hard time seeing primetime allowing that one.
All right, let's pivot to something that we saw coming. I talked about it on my show Thursday and Friday. I thought the Patriots was the best job because of the stability at ownership and Drake May, even Joe Milton as a backup. The quarterback room is set. They're young. They're inexpensive. You got a good owner. Here, I was thinking about this, John. About once every 2 or 3 years, somebody gets a job and you know it's going to work. Andy Reid to Kansas City. Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers. Sean Payton to Denver. Dan Quinn to a lesser degree to Washington with Cliff Kingsbury. Mike Vrabel to New England. He's going to bring up his GM buddy from Tennessee. He's going to get his OC. This one, and then also, conversely, Eberflus in Chicago, Dennis Allen to New Orleans. Some shit doesn't sound like it's going to work the minute the ink's dry. No. I think Vrabel is going to I think this team's going to get good really quickly. And I'm serious. I think they'll be an 8-win. I predicted that Denver this year was going to be better than people think. I think Drake May with a run game with Vrabel. I think this is a great choice. I don't see it failing.
I would say this, he also gets to take over. Turns out Gerard Mayo, while he was a high-level player and a team captain, was like the Jim Tom Sula of coaches. I mean, you read some of these articles, it was pretty embarrassing what was going on there. So you take over an operation that is just desperate to be led. And one thought I had when I was doing the reaction videos and podcasts last night, do you know who the big loser in all this is? Like the Bills are good and they're not going anywhere. But how about Miami and the Jets? I mean, Miami has major question marks with the coach and the direction and just the accountability in that franchise. I don't know if you've seen the list of the Jets
Oh,
interviews. They've interviewed
it's
775
brutal.
people. So it just feels like every day there's a new GM or coach. You're like, what is going on here? So those two franchises, to me, with Vrabel going there, got no shot.
By
Got
the
no
way,
shot. The Bills, listen, they're way better and they got Josh Allen, but I think the Miami Dolphins and the Jets got to be like, this is not an ideal situation
think
for
about
us.
this. The best coaching candidate last year, Jim Harbaugh, went to the Chargers primarily for one reason, Justin Herbert. And this year, the best coaching candidate is Mike Vrabel, primarily for one or two reasons, takes that job. Justin Herbert comp, Drake May. Big, mobile, nice arm, smart kid, doesn't, totally focused. I think Drake May actually showed signs with a bad coaching staff and a pretty weak receiving core. Polk didn't do anything, the receiver from Washington. I think he's got some kids develop more slowly. I don't know. I look at Vrabel in New England. It feels very much Harbaugh Chargers, Peyton Denver, Dan Quinn Washington. I think Josh McDaniels may take that job. I think that's going to work. They just need another back, another receiver. They need juice on offense, but they have some nice defensive pieces.
And I think clearly the Crafts, their relationship with him. I mean, Belichick has battled this, always claimed that they were sneaky cheap more than it was
Yeah.
him at times. And this is a guy with a huge personality that if he wants something, I do think they will acquiesce. I had forgotten about this, but he led the Titans. They were the number one overall
Yes.
seed the year. Remember, Tannehill ended
Yep.
up throwing 3 or 4 picks in that game, and the Bengals beat him. But you look back on these Titans teams, you're like, how the hell did he have them that competitive with Ryan Tannehill, AJ Brown, Derrick Henry? Those two guys were good, but Tannehill was never better than what, the 15th best quarterback in the
And
NFL, and just some solid defensive pieces. But it's not like they had Lawrence Taylor and Ed Reed on
when
the
they let
squad.
AJ Brown go, remember Mike Vrabel came to the
Oh, it
yeah,
unraveled.
he went to the podium and just said, "Yeah." I mean, he didn't even hide his displeasure. I mean, he just went to the podium and said, "Yeah, this sucks." So it's like he knew it. That was the end of Mike Vrabel. I've texted him a couple times. I'm not going to get in too much, but this is somebody that had options. It's like Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh was going to find. I mean, Harbaugh said, "Yeah, I'll go up against Sean Payton. I'll go up against Andy Reid. I don't care. I need a quarterback." In college, you can win. I mean, look at our quarterbacks now. Will Howard at Ohio State, Quinn Ewers, Riley Leonard. College football is really about the roster. It really is. You can have a
For
B
sure.
quarterback. In the NFL, you can't. And I think Drake May is going to pop. I think by the end of next year, by Thanksgiving, we're going to look at Drake May and go, they found a 15-year NFL quarterback.
I also think what makes Vrabel unique is why so many of these Belichick guys have failed is all they know is Bill and they just copy everything he does. Vrabel took, I think, the best parts about Bill, and I saw Taylor Lewan go on a rant. Like Bill used to like question guys in a team meeting, offensive guys about defensive stuff, or what's the guy at the cafeteria's name? I mean, who's the guy on the picture in the hallway? He would just have these, and it was Belichick's thing. And then every guy, the McDaniels, the Patricia, the Flores, they all tried to copy it. It doesn't
Right.
work. It doesn't feel authentic. And Vrabel is able to integrate, I think, the best parts of the accountability, the discipline, and the detail, but also the personality of just a guy. I played in this league. I'm a tough guy. I can relate to you as a human being. I'm probably not gonna have a beer with you, but I'm just a guy. And I think those other guys really struggle with that. And I think Vrabel never coached. He's known as a belt. He just played for him. And then he went off to coach for Urban and then Bill O'Brien. So I think he's got a pretty unique perspective there. And it's why I was so high on Dable, right? He had coached under Belichick, but then he went to Saban and he went to Sean McDermott. He saw this other stuff, but clearly they haven't figured out the quarterback, and that's just a huge advantage. I think they knew this was the hire a month ago.
Yeah.
Like when the Patriots released 8 paragraph statement 2 minutes after the final game, it's pretty clear that thing was written not on Saturday afternoon.
NFL playoffs? We're talking about NFL playoffs? You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is a key to winning in the NFL playoffs, and the key to you scoring big is betting on them. At DraftKings, the number one place to bet touchdowns. If you're ready to place your first bet, make it really simple. A player scoring a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook's app, download it, make your pick. Here's another reason to watch your favorite players crush it on the playoffs. If you're a new customer, you bet $5, that's it. $5, get 200 in bonus bets instantly by betting just $5. So score big, DraftKings Sportsbook during the playoffs. Download the app, use the code Colin, COLIN. That will get you $200 in bonus bets if you bet the $200. So if you want $200 in bonus bets, you got to put in the code Colin. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. So listen, the games this weekend were pretty lousy. A lot of blowouts, ugly games. So John and I are going to spend about 20 minutes talking about something here. And if you're just into football and nothing more, that's fine. But John, until recently, lived in California his entire life. And I've lived here now for close to a decade. And, over the last 4 or 5 days, I have watched an area of Los Angeles burn to the ground to a large extent, an area I lived right next to and have many friends in who have been displaced. My agents, my company has been a little displaced, just people that mean the world to me. And so the last couple of days have been brutal. And this is not really going to be a political discussion. I said this yesterday. I voted for Rick Caruso. I would do it again. I think he's the right person for the right time, especially going forward. But what I watched over the last 4 days, now I will say this, 85-mile-an-hour winds did not allow for choppers or planes for a day and a half to drop water, combined with the fact it was a hurricane, and instead of rain, it had fire. This was going to cause immense damage, regardless who was mayor and some political decisions. But it has been, first, the media in Los Angeles has been remarkable. The local TV stations, CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, the quality of the photojournalism, the reporting, the helicopter pilots, it's been better than CNN. It's been better than network television. So tip of the cap to Los Angeles media. It has been astounding. People are up all night. You can turn it on 2 a.m, they're on. So I want to start with that. The local media in Los Angeles has been better than the network coverage. It has been remarkable. It's been awe-inspiring as somebody who was in local for, 13, 14 years. But I wanted to start with you, John, because, listen, the fire was devastating. This was not a fire with the winds that was going to burn down 6 houses. It, however, exploded to a level, and it's become very political. As somebody who has lived in California until recently for your entire life and your family, what do you make of the political nature of the argument and sort of your thoughts on what you've watched?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent 35 of my 40 years of life in California, and mainly in Northern California, a little bit on the Central Coast. But I would say this. Fires have been a big issue for us, when I lived in the
Yep.
Bay Area, in Santa Rosa, in the Napa areas, and obviously Tahoe a couple years ago. I do think there is an element of, in these states, people say over politicize. I would say the ethos of San Francisco and LA is very political.
Yes.
It's driven that way. And when it comes to regulation,
Yes.
overregulation, and people that run these things that are faceless, right? Gavin's got a face. He's the governor. But these people, a lot of these people in these environmental boards, no one knows who any of these people are. And I do think the brush thing, and I saw it in Tahoe, is these environmental groups refuse to let you clean
Yes,
up
that's
anything.
true.
And I don't know when this began, but it's happened for a long time. And these things, we know these fires, and it's dry. I've never lived in LA. Obviously, Santa Ana winds, because I was thinking about this is about the time, right, when Kobe got in the helicopter crash, and wasn't that the fog and the wind, and you guys get this weather that it's just very difficult in
Oh,
those hills. It's
it's
hard to, you
crazy.
can't see, and then the
I
winds
was
get
gonna.
going.
I lived in Brentwood for a while. The reason I didn't live deep into Palisades was access. I always thought if I had an accident or there was a fire, nobody could get to me. You're up these small, windy canyon roads, and I always told Ann, I'm like, this as I age, I think about stuff. Getting into an accident, having a heart attack. It's like who could get to me?
And Lake Tahoe's a
Yeah.
lot like that. And when they had those fires a couple years ago, everyone was sitting ducks because you got one lane roads, it's windy roads, you can't go that fast. But to me, the element, and listen, I come from generation of farmers that deal with these environmental groups for different things. They're very, very tough to deal with. And I do think I can't speak to like, the winds in Northern California are nowhere near 80 to 100. I've never been in
Neither
100
did
mile an
I.
hour winds, but I do know that these brushes, it's just like a sitting fire
Yep.
zone that it is dry. So, and I just saw Gavin did an executive order. We got to start cleaning the brushes. People have been saying this for a
Yeah.
long
That's a
time.
great point.
And that is I can't speak to the hydrations. Clearly they were empty. And we got Maria, one of our best friends, is a San Francisco fireman. He's down there. He's been there now for a week and he'll be there for another 2 weeks. He's sending us videos. I mean, that video of the stretch of street where the cars
Yeah.
that basically the tractors moving the cars out, he drove it's like something you would see in a movie when he sent the video to, I mean, it's crazy. Obviously, these people they were deadlocked and just got out of their car, and the police told them to start
Listen,
running. I mean,
Trump
that's
Trump
insane.
said it 2 years ago. He talked about that brush issue 2 years ago. Listen, I have always been moderate left leaning, but there is no question the kind of left leaning DAs in Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, a lot of these people are getting voted out. You don't have to change laws when you don't adhere to laws. You don't punish.
Well, California turned
Yeah.
on him, right? Prop 36, almost 75% of people voted against it when Gavin was the opposite. So it's clear that people in California are tired of some of this. I grew up in Davis, California, which is like
Oh, I
Berkeley
know.
light. It's gotten much more liberal, I would say, since I left 20 years ago. When I was probably in junior high or in high school, we built an overpass to connect part of Davis over Highway 80. And they couldn't build it until there were toads. And to keep the toads alive, they had to build them a toad tunnel, which, I mean, this is the late 90s. At the time, it cost like $100,000, which was a lot of money. And I had friends in construction. Whenever they tried to build something, they'd find the burrowing owls. And you're constantly
Yeah.
battling this stuff in California that you're just not battling in these other. And when anything goes wrong, they're never anywhere to be
Yeah.
seen. It's like if something goes wrong on our podcast, my podcast, it's pretty clear it's one of three people that screwed something up. Everyone in the business world is responsible in a company. It's pretty clear who, but in the government, in California specifically, there are all these faceless
Yeah.
people. And I loved it. I come from generations of people that live there, and my family still lives there. And I left because I was like, this is my business where I wanted to raise my children. I'm like, I don't vibe with all this
No.
stuff. And you see these people, like, do you think, and I don't know, I haven't spent time down there, but a lot of people don't believe that they're going to be able to rebuild on the PCH because of the groups. They won't allow it to
Well,
happen. It's
here's the
crazy.
other thing. Who wants to rebuild in an area where every house is being rebuilt? I mean, you're going to have 400 houses connected. I don't want to raise my
Yeah.
kids around construction sites.
No.
It's dangerous, tractors, all these gigantic utility vehicles. Like, listen, my wife's not a huge fan of Los Angeles. So I think I've talked to you about this. I don't know if the audience knows this, is I am moving some operations to Chicago. We purchased a house in Chicago, and I love Chicago. First of all, I don't dislike LA, but Ann and I had talked about this. I remember seeing a story about 2 years ago in the LA Times where they'd spent $24 billion on the homeless problem, and it got worse. And I remember when I lived up near Palisades, and my wife had a couple instances where an aggressive person, at a coffee place or a pharmacy, like approached her, and she was just like, I'm not paying this for a house in this zip code and dealing with this shit. And it's like,
Yeah.
when my sister or my wife or the women in my life, my daughter feel less safe. And so, I don't like people politicizing 80-mile-an-hour winds, but I think the points you make are points I hear from all my friends. And I think,
Because we know this is coming at this point now. It's been happening for a long period of time. So to have some proactive measures, there are going to be times when something is going 100 miles an hour. If
yeah,
something does light, there is no
yeah,
stopping that. I could have every firefighter in the world, there is no slowing that down. But there is ways to lessen the ability for that to get
Yeah.
going, right? And I do think the brush
Yeah.
thing, and again, anything Donald says, like the comment about the fish, everyone's like, "Oh, he's crazy." This is stuff people in California, especially in the business world, constantly make fun of about we got to take care of this. And I'm pro
Right.
animals and pro stuff, but it is over the top again with faceless people and faceless groups that when it does come out, it's like, oh, the average salary in this group is $475,000. And it's just become to me, and part of the reason I liked Arizona is there was a wild, wild
Yeah.
west, an up and coming vibe to it. In California, my grandparents moved there in the 40s or late 40s after World War II. And for a long period of time, when it really took off, it had that vibe from Hollywood to the Central Valley to
Yep.
farming to San Francisco with Silicon Valley. And I would say over these last 10, 15 years, the overregulation of everything and just it's gotten, I mean, it's taken on a life of its own. And I think this LA thing has impacted a lot of people that have been very, very loyal
Yep.
Democrats that you see are really taken back by no one cares about me. No one gives a shit. And I'm paying over 50%. So the government is the majority shareholder in my own income and they don't even care. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
no, I listen, I hear this. It's the two people that I vacation with regularly are moderate to leaning right. Really, really good people. Philanthropic, great dads, great husbands, just really good dudes. And they're in my age, so my wife and I travel with them. And believe me, I hear this constantly about the regulations and how difficult it is. And I think, some of the stuff infuriates me because now anybody can say anything, but Trump winning a second term, and people, the first time, there was a lot of outrage. There wasn't a lot of outrage this time. I think I think there's a lot of Democrats who are very quietly accepting the fact that their party has lost its way, and maybe you find Trump crass, maybe even repugnant, but he's kind of a bottom line economy, border, crime guy. And I think that's really appealing to people, especially when they're in crisis, COVID, wildfires. People want answers, and they're not really interested in being, they're not really interested in bureaucratic answers and safe answers. They want definitive, hard, uncomfortable questions and answers. And I think that's what Trump provides. And I was really taken back by when he won the election. There was a resignation by the left. You know what? We ran a poor campaign, and he connects with more people. And I think listening and watching what's being said during this, it is. I sit here and I look at America, and I think you and I both, we're very lucky people.
For sure.
But there's also a reason in this country that football is so damn popular. Players play hurt. They play in crappy weather. There's no load management. They don't complain about games. They bust their ass. They treat the fans with respect. I think there was a in that COVID space. There was a time in this country where people felt like they couldn't. They had to walk on eggshells on social media, at parties, in public, with what they said. And I think people in this country are over it.
Yeah, I mean, I would be one of those people. It's why California, everything that happened in the Bay Area during COVID, me and them did not see eye to eye. And I was coming to Arizona a lot. I'm talking in like May of 2020, and it was completely normal relative to 2020. And I kept thinking, we're all breathing the same air. What is going on here? And like you said about the costs of living, I had a good buddy a couple years ago by, I mean, just a complete tear down shithole in a really nice area in the East Bay for well over $3 million. And I was like, I'm not, I don't even, this is crazy. And I just moved my life and I came to a place that I've seen is just completely different. I can't tell you how many people that guys I play golf with or people I've met that are California transplants who were just, I didn't want to raise my children in that environment. I couldn't do the regulations. It was healthier for my business to come here. And overall, I think, people are tired of being lectured
Yeah.
constantly. And it's one thing when something crazy happens to like, okay, everyone calm down. when you just never let off the gas pedal on the lecturing, and it cost me 7% to buy an overpriced house. I go into the store and I get 3 items and it costs me $100. Like I just don't want
Yeah.
to hear it. Most human beings, I would say the overwhelming majority of human beings, all have the same needs. They just want to live somewhere safe. They want their kids to be safe and have a place to go to school and have good friends and just have a pretty peaceful
Yeah.
life. And I think we jump the shark on constantly screaming at everybody about the moral outrage. People are
Yeah.
over it because most people, wherever you go, most of my life, I mean, I'm 40 years old, up until the last decade, Democrats, Republicans, people just got along. He just, yeah, I have these friends. My family had these friends. We don't, it's just everyone just, and this becomes so polarizing. But then it got, and I think this has obviously hurt so many people in like the political media. Like, I just don't scream at me. I don't care. I don't, I think what I think, I'm not going to change for you. And I think it's been very difficult for people with the lecturing of just the average income in America is like 60 grand. Like it is very expensive to live in
Yeah.
all
The
these
price.
places. These people are just trying to get by on a daily, weekly, monthly
Yeah.
basis to live life. Life's not that complicated. I think we overcomplicate some stuff, but I do understand like this is a traumatic
Yeah.
event, right? With the Palisades, with the money that's going to be involved, it's going to get very, like it's going to get very hairy, right? The no
Yeah.
insurance, California's going to have to step in. It's going to be, it's going to get way uglier. I mean, it's kind of crazy that at least so far, I think the numbers under 20 people have
Yeah.
died, given the ferocity of these fires, which obviously is a lot. But I mean, relative to what you see, it's crazy that the number's only that high. But the rebuild, the people, I think it's going to be very eye-opening experience for a lot of people that, let's face it, live a pretty, great. I mean, these are pretty. Some of these areas, Pacific Palisades way better than me. But when the average price is $5 to $30 million, but I don't know if you saw Steve Kerr. I think we talk so much about these celebrities and these people worth a lot of money. Steve Kerr was like, my parents bought the house in
Yeah.
1969. And whatever, I forget the props, like Prop 13, whatever the year is, 79 or 85 or whatever, these people haven't been paying updated
That's right.
property taxes. It's the only way they can afford to
Yeah. I
live.
think there's,
So
there's a
it's,
feeling, that in Los Angeles, in these areas, Beverly Hills, Palisades, Manhattan Beach, where I used to live next to a fireman and a school teacher, and they bought
yeah,
their homes 35 years ago. Is that, and I also think there is a feeling that Los Angeles is all crazy left. Beverly Hills voted for Trump, I believe, twice. And the truth is, San Francisco and Los Angeles proper are left leaning. But I think people don't realize outside of the state, when you get out of LA and San Francisco proper, it's very moderate in this state. It's just, it can get Looney Tunes left up in San Francisco and certainly in like Hollywood. But like I have a pretty wide group of friends. Nobody's far left, nobody's far right, but there's a lot more centrists in this area. And the outrage at the politicians. Remember, Palisades is one of the bluest areas of LA. It is agents, it is actors, it is celebrities. It leans. It's not Hollywood, West Hollywood blue, but it's blue. And they are pissed. And I don't know if it will create a seismic shift in the political landscape, but I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if this Karen Bass stuff, the mayor, I wouldn't be shocked if this.
I don't see how
I
she
think this thing
survives.
may
I don't.
unravel quickly. Listen,
I don't see her having any shot with the amount of, I mean, the toll of obviously the homes, but when you talk about the financial and most importantly, whether you're worth $500 million or $500 total, where you live is probably your most personal thing. It's where your
yeah,
family lays their head every night. It's a very emotional thing to lose your home and then feel like no one gives a shit and kind of didn't help you out to begin with and didn't put you in a position to save it, to
yeah.
right. And look at Caruso. Didn't he save the area? His
Rick
own whatever it
Caruso
is.
is a legendary builder in Southern California. He's one of the richest people in Southern California. He's a friend. He's one of the nicest, most gracious, genuine people I've ever met. I mean, Rick Caruso, I could tell you stories for 15 minutes about Rick Caruso, how kind he's been to me and how thoughtful. I thought he was the choice. I think he's the choice now. And that's not even a political statement. That's a common sense statement. He's a builder. He'll get it done. He'll zip through regulations. But he was an obvious choice, I thought, the first time. But, here's a guy that had been a Republican. He's a rich male in Los Angeles. That's a hard ask. He lost a close race. But listen, at this point, if you don't see the value of Rick Caruso, I can't help you. Because we need
I'd implement him tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. and say, Rick, fix it. Help out. Let's go.
John Middlekauff. I don't even think that was a political discussion. I really don't.
No, it was a life discussion. I mean, city burned down.
I judge the quality of a fragrance by the compliments you get. When I wore Ovation for the first time, second time, and third time, usually I walk past somebody and they're like, hey, what you got on? Who over there smelling good? That's the injection of confidence right there to you.
That's right. We want to be at the forefront of using the brand as a gateway for these young athletes. Custom suit, we do a photo shoot, we do video, and it's all about that partnership to create a personal brand.
And I love you guys associating it with more sophistication. Throwing a suit on a kid, sometimes it takes for you to see yourself with a suit on in the mirror to be like, hey, I have more to offer.
Ovation for Men, we're part of Amazon's Black Business Accelerator. Amazon has invested $150 million for the next 4 years to uplift small businesses like myself to scale. Amazon is really putting their money where their mouth is.
They're committed to excellence on every level. They want to scale these businesses to be amongst the best in whatever industry they're in.
You've always been authentic. You've always been pushing excellence.
Well, I appreciate that.
As our slogan says, every man deserves an ovation.
Yes, sir.
Listen, this relationship with Ovation for Men, Richard Sherman, the volume, this is just the beginning.
I appreciate you guys letting me be a part of your journey. If you haven't already checked them out, go out there, get your man some. And get the sport too. And it can be Christmas, birthday, holidays, or yesterday. But make sure you get it.